Pokrovsk was held like a fortress for 3 months. The Ukrainian armed forces threw battalion after battalion there. Every street was turned into a fortified area. They fought for every house. The Russian command was perplexed. The city is strategically important, yes, but not enough to lay down thousands of lives there. The logistics hub can be bypassed. Why such stubbornness? And then Pokrovsk fell. The military entered the city and began an inspection. An ordinary residential building on the edge of the city. Nothing special on the outside. Inside, the same wrecked apartments, trash, traces of battle. But one of the officers noticed something strange. The basement was too deep. According to the building plans, it should have been 3 meters deep, but judging by the stairs, it was 10 meters no less. They went down. At the end of the corridor was a reinforced, welded door with a sign in English. Engineers opened it, and behind the door was a room, and what they discovered there changed the entire understanding of the conflict. It became clear who was actually fighting in this war, and why the West was so afraid of losing Pokrovsk. Pokrovsk is a small city in the Donetsk region. Before the war, 50,000 people lived there. Mines, factories, and schools worked. An ordinary industrial city, like tens of others in the Donbass. But geographically, Pokrovsk stands in a special place. Roads to the west pass through it, highways connecting Donetsk with central Ukraine. Whoever controls Pokrovsk controls logistics in the entire direction. Supplies, reinforcements, and equipment go through the city. Lose Pokrovsk, and you lose the ability to hold the defense further to the east. Russian troops began approaching the city in the summer, slowly, methodically. They took settlements around it, cut roads, and squeezed the ring. Standard encirclement tactics. The Ukrainian armed forces should have either retreated in advance or ended up in a cauldron, but they did not retreat. On the contrary, they pulled more and more forces to the city. Battalions that could have been used in other sectors were transferred to Pokrovsk. Equipment was driven there in columns. Ammunition was brought in by wagon loads. The Russian command watched this with bewilderment. The city is important, yes, but not enough to lay down thousands of soldiers there. The logistics hub can be bypassed from the north. Why create a fortified area where you can simply retreat and save people? The assault began in September. Russian units entered the suburbs. They expected stubborn but rational resistance. Usually the Ukrainian forces fight for key points and then withdraw to save their strength. But here, everything went differently. The Ukrainian armed forces held on to every street, turning the city into a fortress. Every house was a fortified position. Basements were connected by trenches, snipers on the roofs, machine gunners in the windows. They retreated only when the building collapsed from artillery fire. The battles went on week after week. Russian troops advanced meter by meter. Every block was taken with a fight. The enemy retreated to the next street, entrenched themselves there, and started again. Losses grew on both sides. The city turned into ruins. Commanders on the front line were perplexed. Such stubbornness made no sense. Pokrovsk was already effectively surrounded. Supplies came only along one road under constant shelling. It was logical to withdraw troops while there was still an opportunity, but the order was one. Hold on. They defended Pokrovsk as if it were the capital, as if the fate of the entire war depended on this city. Intelligence began to record oddities. Western instructors, who were previously seen only in rear training centers, were now appearing directly in the city. They were detected at positions, in headquarters, in first-line companies. Why train fighters in the middle of a battle? It is already too late. The defense was coordinated unusually clearly. Usually, Ukrainian communications work intermittently. Commanders lose control of units. But here everything was different. Orders arrived instantly. Reserves were transferred exactly to where the breakthrough was. Artillery fire was corrected with perfect accuracy. Someone was managing the defense at a level inaccessible to ordinary Ukrainian headquarters. Someone who had better equipment, more reliable communications, and more precise intelligence. Then strikes on the Russian rear began, precise, calibrated. They hit ammunition depots behind the front line, command posts, and equipment concentration areas. The coordinates were fresh. Strikes were delivered exactly where it hurt the most. Usually, the Ukrainian forces receive intelligence with a delay, but here, information arrived in real time. Someone was tracking the movement of Russian troops and instantly transmitting coordinates, satellites, drones, agents all together. And then intelligence intercepted conversations in English, a pure American accent discussing coordinates for a strike, using call signs that did not exist in the Ukrainian structure, speaking in military jargon used in the US Army. It became clear who was actually coordinating the defense of Pokrovsk. Not the Ukrainian command, but Western specialists, NATO. They sat somewhere in the city, received data from satellites, and managed the battle. The Ukrainian armed forces were merely executors of orders. The question remained open. Why is Pokrovsk important, but not critical? Why did the West invest so many resources in holding it? Why risk their people on the front line? What were they guarding there? There was no answer, but with each day it became clear. The struggle for this city is not just for territory. There was something else there, something that could not be lost. The assault lasted 3 months. In November, the defense finally collapsed. The last Ukrainian units withdrew from the city. Part surrendered into captivity. Part left along the one remaining road under fire. Pokrovsk fell. Russian troops entered the city, destroyed, scorched but taken. They began clearing, checking basements, attics, shelters. They looked for remaining enemy fighters, caches with weapons, documents. The findings were expected: abandoned equipment, American jeeps, boxes of ammunition from NATO countries, Western-made radio stations. Nothing new. Everyone knew that the West supplies Ukraine with weapons. But then they began to find documents in English, equipment, operating instructions, maps with marks in Latin script, notebooks with notes, photographs of people of clearly non-Slavic appearance in military uniforms without insignia. All this confirmed the presence of Western military personnel, but did not yet explain the scale. Why so much effort? Why 3 months of defense at any cost? By the way, if you are interested in knowing the truth about what they found there, like this, right now, it gets even more serious. One of the officers was walking around a residential quarter on the outskirts. Shabby 5-story buildings, broken windows, traces of battles. Nothing unusual. Ordinary ruins of an ordinary city after an ordinary assault. But one house attracted attention. The windows of the first floor were blocked with sandbags too carefully. The doors were reinforced with steel sheets. The approach to the building was covered by fire from neighboring houses. Someone was guarding this place very seriously. The officer called a group. They went inside. The apartments were smashed, furniture thrown out. They went down to the basement, turned on flashlights, and saw a steel door, new, with an electronic lock in the basement of a destroyed 5-story building. This was it. What they had been guarding for 3 months. What they laid down 1,000 lives for. What explains everything. The officer looks at the door and realizes something is wrong here. In ordinary basements, they do not install such locks. Electronics, a code panel, a reinforced frame. This is equipment for guarded facilities, military bases, secret warehouses, but not for residential buildings. He goes upstairs, calls sappers on the radio. His voice is calm, but the tension is felt. Specialists are needed. It is unknown what is behind the door. It might be mined. It might be protected by some other systems. Sappers arrive in 20 minutes, inspect the door, check with sensors. No mines, no traps. Just a very good lock, electronic, with several degrees of protection. It can be cracked, but time is needed. They work for an hour. They connect equipment to the panel, sort through codes. The lock clicks. The mechanism gives way. The door slowly opens. Behind it is darkness. They turn on flashlights. A corridor, concrete walls painted grey. The floor is clean, recently washed. The air is stale but without the smell of mold. Someone maintained this room in order until the very last moment. They walk along the corridor for 10 meters. At the end is another door, ordinary, unreinforced, opens easily. Behind it is a large room, 30 by 20 meters. The first thing that catches the eye is server racks. Tall, black, with blinking indicators. 10 or more of them. Cables stretch across the floor, connecting equipment. Computers on tables, monitors turned off. Keyboards with English layout, maps on the walls, large detailed. One shows the Donetsk region, another the entire east of Ukraine. The third, a part of Russia bordering Ukraine. On the maps are marks, colored circles, squares, triangles. Signatures in small handwriting, in Latin script. The officer comes closer, reads coordinates, names of objects, Russian military objects, ammunition depots, airfields, command posts, unit deployment locations. Everything is marked, systematized, updated. One of the fighters turns on the light. Fluorescent lamps flash, illuminating the room completely. Now everything is visible. Racks with folders, safes against the wall, boards with graphs and diagrams, tables piled with papers. On one of the tables lies a document. The officer takes it. English text. Header on a letterhead with the NATO logo. Below is a signature and a stamp. An official document of the alliance, here in the basement of a residential building in Pokrovsk. Another fighter finds a laptop. Open, not turned off. The screen has gone dark, but upon moving the mouse it lights up again. On the desktop are folders with files, names in English, intelligence, targets, communications. Behind the door was what proves direct NATO participation in the war against Russia. Not just weapons supplies, not just training somewhere in the rear. Their specialists worked here, collected data, processed information, selected targets for strikes, coordinated operations, fought with the hands of the Ukrainian military. But they fought. The officer takes out a radio, calls command, reports the find. His voice is steady, but he chooses his words carefully. What they found here goes beyond a normal cleanup. This is already politics, proof of what they had been talking about for 2 years, but what the West always denied. The command orders no one to be let in, the object to be guarded, nothing to be touched. Specialists are driving out. The fighters remain inside, looking around. The room is fitted out thoroughly, air conditioners on the walls to cool the servers, a generator in the corner for autonomous power, a fuel supply in canisters, a refrigerator with food and water, folding beds for rest. Someone lived here for weeks. On one of the boards hangs a duty schedule. Names are written in Latin script. Smith, Johnson, Kowalski, Americans, British, Poles, shift schedule. Who worked when? The last entry was 3 days ago. That means they left recently. Evacuated before the fall of the city. One of the fighters opens a safe. It is unlocked. Inside are folders with documents. He takes one out, flips through it. Reports on conducted operations, dates, coordinates, results. A strike on an ammunition depot. On such and such a day, so many tons of shells were destroyed. Enemy losses, referring to Russian troops, are estimated at such and such a number of people. Everything is recorded, systematized, reported to someone. NATO command received these reports, knew what was happening here, directed operations, officially claimed not to participate in the conflict, but in reality fought against Russia. Within half an hour, specialists arrive, military intelligence officers, communications experts, translators. They enter the room, stop, look around silently. One of the officers will later say, "I didn't believe my eyes. I knew the West was helping Ukraine, but this is another level. This is no longer help, this is direct participation." They begin work, photographing everything, maps, documents, equipment. They remove hard drives from servers, collect papers in boxes. Everything needs to be taken out, studied, documented. A communications expert examines the antennas on the roof, goes up, returns in 10 minutes, reports. Satellite communications, powerful equipment, a secure channel. The military communicated directly with NATO centers, received data from reconnaissance satellites, transmitted information to the Ukrainian command. The translator studies documents, finds equipment operating instructions. The manufacturer is an American company supplying equipment to the military. Serial numbers point to a batch sent to Europe 2 years ago. Then this batch disappeared from the document flow, officially written off, but in reality, sent here. Another expert connects to one of the computers. The system is password protected, but he bypasses the protection, goes into files, opens a folder named Operations. Inside are tables, a list of targets on Russian territory, each target with a description. Object type, coordinates, priority for strike, expected effect of destruction. He scrolls down the list. Hundreds of rows, hundreds of targets, military bases, warehouses, bridges, railway junctions, energy facilities, all on Russian territory. The strike plan is systematic, thought out, developed by professionals. In another folder are files with results. Which targets have already been hit, when? With what? What damage was inflicted? Reports are accompanied by photographs, satellite images before and after the strike. It is visible how the object is destroyed, the warehouse blown up, the bridge destroyed. One of the intelligence officers sits on a chair, lights a cigarette, looks at the screen, shakes his head. This is not just a base, this is a war control center. From here they planned strikes. From here they coordinated attacks. Here sat those who chose what to hit, who to kill. The Ukrainian armed forces carried out orders, received coordinates, launched missiles, delivered strikes. But the decision was not made by them. The decision was made here by Western military personnel, NATO officers, those who officially do not participate in the conflict. The work continues for several hours. By evening, all equipment is seized. Documents are packed, the base is sealed, security is reinforced. The information is kept secret for now. Need to study the materials, understand the scale, decide how to use this find. But one thing is already clear. Pokrovsk was defended for 3 months, not just for nothing. The city was critically important because in it was located the center linking NATO and the Ukrainian armed forces, the brain of operations against Russia. The loss of this base is a blow to the entire coordination system. Now it is clear why the West was so afraid of losing Pokrovsk. Specialists work in the basement for 3 days, taking apart equipment, studying documents, reconstructing the picture of what was happening here. With every hour, the scale becomes clearer and scarier. They start with the hardware. Server racks, manufactured by American companies, models of the latest generations. Major corporations and military agencies use such things. The power is enormous, capable of processing colossal volumes of data in real time. On the roof of the house stood satellite antennas, camouflaged but powerful. Communication went directly with NATO military satellites. The channel was secure, encrypted. Ordinary Ukrainian military personnel do not use such communications. This is alliance equipment. Only the chosen have access. Experts check signal interception systems. Electronic intelligence equipment is capable of intercepting conversations, tracking the movement of equipment by radio emission, detecting the operation of radar and communication systems. The range of action is tens of kilometers. From this base, they controlled the entire region. Computers are configured to work with mapping systems. The software is military. The interface is similar to what is used in NATO headquarters. Maps were detailed, updated constantly. Data arrived from satellites every few hours. On the walls hung printed maps. Donetsk region, Luhansk, Belgorod, Kursk, Voronezh regions of Russia. On each, tens of marks. Red squares, military objects, blue circles, warehouses, yellow triangles, transport hubs, green dots, command posts. Each mark is signed. Coordinates, object name, priority for destruction. Security assessment, recommended type of weapon for the strike. Professional work of military analysts. An intelligence specialist studies the map of the Belgorod region. Counts marks, 38 objects, an ammunition depot near Shebekino, an airfield in Belgorod, a railway junction in Valuyki, a bridge across the river, an oil depot, an electrical substation. Next to each mark is a date. These are not old data. The information was fresh, updated constantly. Someone was watching these objects, tracking changes, recording new targets, preparing them for strikes. In personal belongings left at the base, they find passports, or rather, copies of passports, probably forgotten in the haste of evacuation. American, British, Polish citizens, military specialists, communications officers, analysts, reconnaissance system operators. Documents in several languages. English predominates, but there is Polish, German, and French, a coalition. Specialists from different NATO countries worked here together. Officially, they are not in Ukraine. Officially, NATO does not participate in the conflict. But in reality, Their officers sat in a basement in Pokrovsk and coordinated strikes on Russia. One of the experts finds a duty log, a thick notebook. Records were kept daily. Who is on shift, what tasks were performed, what data was received, what targets were transferred to the Ukrainian command. He reads the entries for the last month. Every day new coordinates, every day transfer of targets. Objects in the Kursk region, the Belgorod region, the Voronezh region, sometimes in the Donbass itself, in the rear of Russian troops. Everything is systematized, everything is documented. The translator studies instructions. The documents describe the base's operating procedure, how to receive data from satellites, how to process information, how to choose targets, how to transmit coordinates to the Ukrainian military, how to monitor the execution of strikes, how to evaluate results. The process is fine-tuned to the smallest detail. NATO satellites fix the object, transmit data to the base. Analysts process the information, determine the type of object, its importance, vulnerability, enter it into the database, transmit coordinates to the Ukrainian command. The Ukrainian armed forces deliver the strike. The base receives a report on the results. The cycle closes. This base managed death in the Russian rear. From here went coordinates for missile strikes. From here drone attacks were planned. Here they chose what to hit, who to kill, which object to destroy next. The Ukrainian armed forces were executors, pressing the launch button. But the decision was not made by them. The decision was made here by NATO officers. The scale of the operation is impressive. One of the computers contains a database with hundreds of targets, not only military objects, infrastructure, energy, transport, bridges, everything that can weaken Russia, everything that can be hit without causing direct escalation. Specialists find correspondence. Email is secure, but Russian experts hacked it. Letters between the base in Pokrovsk and NATO command centers. Brussels, Ramstein in Germany. Polish military bases. Coordination is happening at the highest level. In one letter, a strike plan for the next week is discussed. An officer from Brussels approves the list of targets, gives permission to transmit coordinates, warns to avoid objects where civilians might be. Too big a scandal if it becomes known. In another letter, a report on a conducted operation. A strike on an ammunition depot was successful, the object destroyed. Enemy losses estimated at several tens of people. Command is satisfied, asks to continue in the same spirit. Everything is businesslike, professional, without emotions. War for them is work. Choose a target, transmit coordinates, receive a report. Next target, routine. People are dying somewhere there, but here it is just numbers in reports. Share this video. People need to know the truth about who is actually fighting in this war. Experts study communication schemes. The base in Pokrovsk is not alone. It is part of a network. On the map are marked several more points: Kharkiv, Dnipro, Odessa, Lviv. In each city a similar center. Each is responsible for its own region. Pokrovsk controlled the east, other bases, other directions, a network of intelligence centers throughout Ukraine. All connected to each other. All receive data from one source, NATO satellites. All work according to a single methodology, all report to one command. The system is large-scale, well thought out, expensive. This is not created in a month. This is the result of long work. Planning, construction, installation of equipment, personnel training, system launch, process debugging, years of preparation, millions of dollars of investment. NATO invested seriously in this infrastructure. Why? Officially, the alliance is not fighting. Officially, NATO only helps Ukraine defend itself, supplies weapons, trains soldiers, but does not participate directly, yet in reality creates a network of bases for coordinating strikes on Russia. Intelligence target designation, operations management, essentially conducting the war simply with other people's hands. One of the analysts opens a folder classified as secret. Files are protected by additional passwords. They hack it for a long time, but the scariest thing was found in the password-protected files. Inside are project documents. The name is classified. Only a code designation is mentioned. The description is vague, but one thing is clear. It is about a new type of weaponry, a technology that the Ukrainian armed forces do not yet have, something that is being developed specifically for this war. The documents mention the word laser several times in different contexts. Laser system, testing of laser equipment, coordination of testing. What is it about? What weapon? Why the mention in intelligence-based documents? There are answers, but not all. Part of the files were deleted before evacuation. Part encrypted so that it is impossible to hack for now. But the general picture is coming together. The base in Pokrovsk was engaged not only in intelligence, it participated in a project to develop a new weapon. Exactly what remains to be found out. Specialists continue work. Every found file is a new piece of the puzzle. Every document is one more proof. NATO is fighting against Russia, not indirectly, but directly. Their officers choose targets. Their systems transmit coordinates. Their technologies kill Russian soldiers and civilians. Pokrovsk was the center of this system in the east. Loss of the base is a blow to the entire network. Communication is disrupted. Coordination is difficult. The Ukrainian armed forces are left without NATO's eyes and ears. The effectiveness of strikes has fallen. Western military personnel have lost control over the situation in the region. Now it is clear why the city was held for 3 months. Not for the sake of territory, for the sake of the base, for the sake of equipment, for the sake of the project that was being developed there. To lose all this is to lose the advantage, and advantage in modern war decides the outcome. But the base is captured, equipment seized, documents in Russia's hands. The West lost not just a city, it lost what it had been creating for years. And now the world will know who really stands behind this war. Russian cybersecurity specialists work with the servers for a week. The systems are seriously protected. Multi-level encryption. Passwords change according to an algorithm. Attempts at incorrect access block the system. NATO did not skimp on security, but time and professionalism do their job. They hack the protection level by level, get access to files, begin to study the contents. What they find exceeds expectations. The first files are reports on target transfers. Tables with coordinates, each row. An object on Russian territory or in the rear of Russian troops. Date of coordinate transfer to Ukrainian command, type of recommended weapon, strike priority. Hundreds of rows, hundreds of targets, military warehouses, bridges, railway junctions, airfields, command posts, energy facilities. Everything is systematized. Everything is ready for a strike. It remained only to give the command. Part of the targets have already been hit. Opposite them is a mark, executed, date of strike. Result. Damage assessment. Cold numbers. Behind every number are dead people. Destroyed infrastructure, thwarted operations. But here it is just statistics. Correspondence. Secure mail between the base in Pokrovsk and NATO command centers. Letters go to Brussels, to the Alliance headquarters, to Ramstein, to the largest American base in Europe, to Poland, from where aid to Ukraine is coordinated. Officers discuss operation plans. Command approves targets, gives permission for data transfer to the Ukrainian armed forces, monitors execution, demands reports. Professional military correspondence is businesslike, without emotions. In one letter, a colonel from Brussels approves a list of 2 targets, asks to focus on objects in the Belgorod region. The railway junction is a priority. Its destruction will hinder the supply of Russian troops at the front. The strike is planned for the next week. In another letter, a report on results. The railway junction is hit. 3 tracks are disabled. Restoration will take weeks. Enemy personnel losses are minimal. The object is military. Command is satisfied, asks to continue work. Names, surnames, ranks, specific people. Colonel Johnson from the U.S. Air Force, Major Kowalski from the Polish Army, Captain Smith from British intelligence. Officially, they are not in Ukraine. Officially, they serve in their own countries. But in reality, they coordinate strikes on Russia from a basement in Pokrovsk. Proofs of direct NATO participation are irrefutable. This is not indirect help. Not weapons supplies. These are alliance officers planning operations, choosing targets, giving orders, fighting against Russia with the hands of Ukrainian soldiers. But fighting. Specialists find documents with secret classifications, high level. Access limited to a narrow circle of persons. Files are protected by additional passwords, harder to hack. They work for several days. Finally, the protection gives way. They open a folder inside project documents. The code name is blurred, the full name is classified, but the content gives an idea of the scale. In one folder lay what could not be ignored. The project is connected with the development of a new type of weaponry, a technology that the Ukrainian armed forces do not yet have. Something advanced, something capable of changing the balance of forces. Western countries are investing serious resources in development. The word laser appears several times in the documents. Laser system, testing of laser equipment, coordination of tests, data transfer from ranges. What exactly is being discussed is not yet clear, but the direction is understandable. Laser weapons are a promising technology. They have been working on it for decades. The USA, Israel, China invest billions in research. Air defense systems based on lasers are capable of shooting down missiles, drones, shells, instantly, silently, with high precision. If such technology appears in the Ukrainian armed forces, it is a problem. Russian missiles will become less effective. Drones will be shot down before reaching the target. Superiority in the air will be in question. The balance of forces will change. The documents contain links to research centers, laboratories in the USA, ranges in Europe, production sites. Coordinates are blurred, names are encoded, but the general picture comes together. The project is international. Several countries participate in the development. The base in Pokrovsk played a role in this project. What exactly? Documents explain partially. The base collected data for tests, tracked Russian targets, transmitted information to developers, coordinated testing in real combat conditions. Ukraine became a testing ground, a territory where new weapons can be tested against a real enemy. NATO receives data, analyzes effectiveness, makes adjustments, improves technology. The Ukrainian armed forces play the role of test subjects, checking if the weapon works as intended. The cynicism is striking. People die, cities are destroyed, and for the West, this is an opportunity to test technologies, get data, improve weaponry. War as a laboratory, Ukrainians and Russians as material for experiments. Part of the files are encrypted so that it is impossible to crack. Algorithms are complex, keys are unavailable. Specialists try different methods, so far without result. Perhaps months will be required. Perhaps it will not be possible to decrypt at all. But even what is already open gives a picture. The project is large-scale, long-term, expensive. Western countries invest huge funds, expect to receive a weapon capable of turning the tide, giving Ukraine an advantage, weakening Russia. The documents mention tests conducted on the territory of Ukraine. Results are positive. The technology works. Refinement is required. The next stage is planned: scaling, production of a pilot batch, delivery to the front. The schedule is aggressive. The developers are hurrying. They want to complete the project quickly, put the weapon into action, and change the course of the war. But the capture of the base in Pokrovsk disrupted everything. The data fell into Russia's hands. Coordination is interrupted. Tests are stopped. The project is under threat. The West will have to revise its plans and look for new paths. Time is lost. Resources are wasted. One of the documents contains a risk assessment. What happens if the base falls into enemy hands? The consequences are catastrophic. Secrets revealed, technology compromised, NATO participation proven. A political scandal is inevitable. That is exactly why they held Pokrovsk so desperately, not for the sake of the city, but for the sake of the base, for the sake of the project. To lose all this meant losing years of work, millions of dollars, and a strategic advantage, but they lost it. Russian troops took the city, seized the base, and confiscated the documents. Now Moscow knows about the project, knows about the laser weapons, knows about NATO plans, and can use this information. The project that could have changed the course of the war is now in question. Specialists continue to study the files. Every document is a new detail. Every detail is part of a big picture. The picture is terrifying. NATO is not just helping Ukraine. The alliance is waging war against Russia, developing weapons, testing music technologies, coordinating strikes and planning operations. Officially, the West is not a participant in the conflict. Officially, NATO is neutral. But in reality, Officers of the alliance are sitting in Ukrainian cities, managing the war, killing Russian soldiers, destroying Russian facilities, and using Ukraine as a tool, as a testing ground, as a territory for war against Russia. The documents from Pokrovsk prove this irrefutably. Now the question is, what will Russia do with this information? How will it use it? What consequences, music, will there be for the West? The answers are ahead. But one thing is clear right now. The war has reached a new level, and the truth is starting to come out. Russian experts have been deciphering the documents for several days. Gradually, the picture of the project they were working on in Pokrovsk is coming together. The scale is impressive. The technologies are advanced. The goals are ambitious. And all this was developed in secret under the guise of ordinary military aid to Ukraine. The project is connected with the creation of a laser air defense system, not a theoretical development on paper, a real weapon. Prototypes have already been created, tests were conducted. The results are encouraging for the West, threatening for Russia. The idea is simple. A powerful laser hits aerial targets, missiles, drones, shells, instantly, silently, with high precision. The technology is not new. They have been working on it for decades. The USA spends billions on research. Israel has created several samples. Music, China is investing in development. But the problem has always been one thing: power. Lasers require a huge amount of music energy. The installations turn out to be bulky, stationary, and immobile. On the battlefield, such a weapon is vulnerable. It is easy to detect, easy to destroy. The effectiveness is questionable. Western engineers worked on a solution to make the laser installation compact, mobile, capable of working autonomously. Years of experiments, a multitude of failures. But gradually the technology was perfected. The documents from Pokrovsk describe the result of these efforts: a new generation laser system. Compact, placed on a truck chassis. Mobile, it can move along with the troops. Autonomous, it has its own generator for power. The power is sufficient to hit targets. At a distance of several kilometers, it shoots down drones easily. Cruise missiles too. Ballistics are harder, but with the right coordination, it is possible. It intercepts artillery shells on approach. The technical characteristics are impressive. Reaction time is fractions of a second. The laser locks onto the target automatically. Tracking systems monitor the object. The computer calculates the trajectory. The laser hits exactly the needed point without missing. A weapon that leaves no chances. A missile flies toward the target. Detection systems spot it. The laser aims. The beam hits the body. Metal melts in seconds. The missile is destroyed in the air, explodes, or falls uncontrollably. It does not reach the target. A drone approaches positions. The laser turns on. The beam hits the engine. Electronics fail. The drone falls. The mission is thwarted. The operator loses connection. The target is not hit. The advantage is colossal. Russian aviation uses missiles for strikes, drones for reconnaissance and attacks. Artillery shells positions. But if the armed forces of Ukraine receive laser systems, the effectiveness of all this will drop sharply. Missiles will be shot down before hitting the target. Drones destroyed on approach. Shells intercepted in the air. Russian troops will lose their advantage in firepower. Air superiority will be in question. The balance of power will change. Why are lasers so dangerous? Speed. An ordinary missile is intercepted by another missile. Reaction time is a few seconds. The target can maneuver, dodge, shoot down the interceptor with countermeasures. There are chances. The laser strikes instantly. Light moves fastest of all. From the moment of target detection to the shot is fractions of a second. It is impossible to dodge. Countermeasures do not work. The missile simply does not have time to react. Destruction is inevitable. Another advantage is invisibility. Ordinary air defense systems work with radars. Radiation is detected by the enemy. The position is calculated. A retaliatory strike is delivered. But the laser does not emit radio waves. It just shines. It is difficult to detect it, especially if it shoots in short pulses. Russian intelligence might not notice the installation. While it is silent, it is invisible. And when it starts working, music, it is already too late. Missiles are shot down, drones destroyed, the strike is thwarted. The position of the installation remains unknown. Western military understood the potential of the technology, invested huge funds, and hurried with development. But tests in laboratories are one thing. Combat application is completely different. A check in real conditions, on a real enemy, was needed. Ukraine became the ideal testing ground. The conflict is ongoing. There are targets. Russian missiles fly, drones work, artillery shoots. Yan can test lasers in action. Collect data, assess effectiveness, make adjustments. Subscribe to the Heroes of the People channel. It will get even more serious further on. We will tell the whole truth about what is happening in this war. The documents describe the stage of the project. Several prototypes have already been created, produced at factories in the USA and Europe, delivered to Ukraine secretly under the guise of ordinary military equipment and placed at positions in different regions. Tests began several months ago. The first results are positive. Lasers shot down Russian music drones, intercepted cruise missiles. Not always, but often enough to confirm functionality. And the most terrible thing, it was already tested on Russian military personnel. Data was transmitted to the base in Pokrovsk. Analysts processed the information: how many targets hit, how many misses, what factors affect accuracy, in what weather the laser works better, in what weather worse. The base coordinated the tests, selected targets for testing, tracked Russian missiles and drones, transmitted data to the operators of laser installations, controlled the results, and reported to the NATO command. The Western military received real data. Not theoretical calculations, not simulations, facts. The laser works, hits targets, changes the situation in the air. The project is successful. One can move to the next stage. The next stage is mass production. The documents contain plans to order 20 units in the first batch, place them along the front line, and test them on a wider scale. If the results are confirmed, order another 100. The schedule is aggressive. Production was planned to launch in several months. Deliveries to begin by spring. By summer, the Ukrainian armed forces were supposed to receive dozens of laser systems. By autumn, hundreds. Russian aviation would have faced a serious problem. Missile strikes would have become ineffective. Drones would have stopped reaching targets. Artillery shelling would have lost meaning. Shells would be shot down on approach. Russia's advantage in firepower would have evaporated. NATO invested huge money in the project. Billions of dollars, the best engineers, advanced technologies, production capacities, logistics, all to give Ukraine a weapon capable of changing the course of the war. Pokrovsk played a key role. The base collected data, coordinated tests, and ensured communication between developers and the testing ground. Without it, the project would have stalled. Information would be lost, coordination would suffer, effectiveness would fall. That is exactly why they held the city for 3 months. Not for the sake of a strategic position, not for the sake of logistics, but for the sake of the base, for the sake of the project. To lose Pokrovsk meant losing the coordination center. Data would stop arriving, music tests would stop, the schedule would be disrupted. Western military understood the risks. The documents contain an assessment of the consequences. If the base falls into Russia's hands, the project is under threat. Secrets will be revealed. The technology will become known to the enemy. The advantage is lost. Years of work wasted, but the risks did not stop them. The project is too important, the potential too great. They decided to take the risk, hold the base to the last, and evacuate only when the city falls. They hoped to have time to destroy the most secret data. They did not have time. Russian troops took Pokrovsk faster than expected. The base is captured, equipment seized. Documents are in the hands of the enemy. The project is exposed. Plans are known. The technology is no longer a secret. The West will have to revise its strategy. Perhaps they will close the project. Perhaps they will change the approach, create a new coordination base in another place. But time is lost, resources spent, advantage missed. Russia now knows about the laser systems, knows their characteristics, weaknesses, can develop countermeasures, change the tactics of using missiles, and drones adapt, music, and neutralize the threat before it becomes real. The documents from Pokrovsk gave Moscow priceless information. Not just proof of NATO participation, not just lists of targets for strikes, but data on a secret project, on technology that could change the war. Now, this technology is no longer a secret, and the threat can be prevented. The Russian Ministry of Defense has been studying the materials from Pokrovsk for 2 weeks. Documents are being translated, data analyzed, lawyers are evaluating the evidentiary base, deciding how to use the find. It is impossible to remain silent. The information is too important. The world must know. At the end of November, the official representative of the Russian Ministry of Defense holds a briefing. Journalists gather in the hall, expecting regular reports from the front. But the topic today is different. The representative begins with an accusation. NATO is directly participating in the conflict against Russia. The statement is backed by evidence. Documents are demonstrated on the screen. Partially, the most secret data is classified, but what is shown is sufficient. Maps with Russian facilities, correspondence of alliance officers, reports on strike coordination, names of Western military personnel, NATO logos on official papers. The representative reads out fragments of letters. Colonel Johnson approves targets for strikes. Major Kowalski reports music on the results of operations. Captain Smith requests additional data from satellites. Business correspondence of the military, coordination of combat actions, direct participation. The accusation is serious. NATO places its officers on the territory of Ukraine, creates intelligence centers, coordinates strikes on Russian facilities, develops new weapons, tests them, music on Russian military personnel. In essence, it is fighting against Russia with the hands of the Ukrainian armed forces, but it is fighting. The Russian side demands explanations, calls on the international community to pay attention, a violation of all norms. The West is being hypocritical. Officially, it does not participate in the conflict, but in reality, it is waging war, lying to the world community, provoking escalation. The documents are handed over to the UN, to the Security Council. Russia insists on an investigation. Western countries must answer. Explain the presence of their military in Ukraine. Explain the intelligence bases. Explain the coordination of strikes. The reaction of the West is predictable. The first hours, silence. No one comments. NATO representatives refuse to make statements. They refer to the need to study the information. Time is needed for verification. We will give an answer later. A day or two passes. There are no official comments, but conversations begin in the corridors. Diplomats whisper, journalists dig. Sources in Western military circles leak information, partially confirming, yes, there were specialists, yes, assistance was provided, but not on such a scale as Russia claims. Finally, an official position appears. The NATO press secretary makes a statement, short, vague. The alliance helps Ukraine defend itself, provides intelligence data, trains the military, but does not participate in combat actions directly. The documents from Pokrovsk are fakes of Russian propaganda, fabrication, disinformation. The goal is to justify aggression against Ukraine. Evidence is not provided. Specific accusations are not refuted. Just general phrases. Russia is lying, we are not guilty. Believe us, do not believe them. Standard rhetoric, denial without arguments. Western media picks up the line, publishes music articles. Russian documents are unreliable. The source is dubious, impossible to verify. Most likely a forgery. Moscow is trying to justify the war, accuses NATO to distract attention from its own actions. The West is silent, and silence is more eloquent than words. The refusal to provide counter-arguments speaks for itself. If the documents are fake, why not prove it? Why not publish a rebuttal? Why not name specific errors in Russian accusations? The silence betrays them. The West knows that the documents are real, but it is impossible to admit it. Admission would mean a scandal, a political crisis. Questions would begin inside NATO countries. Citizens would ask governments, why are our military fighting in Ukraine? Who authorized it? Why didn't they tell us? Why do we risk escalation with a nuclear power? Parliaments would demand investigations, the opposition would attack ruling parties, media would dig deeper, find new facts. The scandal would grow, governments would fall, politicians would lose posts. The reputation of the alliance would collapse. It is simpler to deny. Call everything fakes. Hope that the public will forget. Switch to other news. The scandal will die down. Life will return to its usual course. The standard tactic works more often than one would like, but the find in Pokrovsk proves the obvious. NATO is fighting against Russia, not indirectly. Directly, officers of the alliance coordinate strikes. Western technologies kill Russian soldiers. NATO satellites choose targets. Intelligence centers transmit coordinates. The Ukrainian armed forces simply press the launch button. Executors, music tool. NATO fights with their hands. This is not a proxy war in the classical understanding. A proxy war is when one side finances, arms, trains another, but does not participate in battles, does not manage operations, does not choose targets. Here it is different. NATO does not just help. The alliance commands, plans, coordinates, practically fights. Using Ukrainian soldiers as infantry, Western countries are taking a risk. Direct music conflict with Russia is dangerous. Escalation can lead to catastrophe. Both sides have nuclear weapons. A mistake is fraught with consequences for the whole world. But NATO continues. It increases participation, gets deeper into the conflict. The stakes are rising. Russian military continue to study the documents from Pokrovsk, analyzing communication schemes. The maps show music, other points. Kharkiv, Dnipro, Odessa, Lviv. In each city, there is an intelligence base. Pokrovsk is not the only network of centers across the entire territory of Ukraine. Each base performs its function. Pokrovsk controlled the east, Kharkiv, the north, Dnipro, the center, Odessa, the south, Lviv, the west. Coordination goes on between all centers. Data exchange, a common database of targets, unified command from Brussels, a thought-out system. Duplication of information. If one base goes out of order, others continue work. The loss of Pokrovsk is a blow, but not critical. The remaining centers function. Intelligence continues. Strikes are delivered. The system lives. The Russian command makes a decision to search for other bases. The priority, music, is high. Capture of every center. New evidence, new data, more information about NATO plans. The opportunity to disrupt coordination, weaken the targeting system. Intelligence is activated. Agents are working. Interception of signals is intensified. They are looking for traces, unusual communication activity. Western specialists in cities. Guarded facilities without a clear purpose. Every lead is studied. Every trace is checked. The laser project is under threat. The loss of the base in Pokrovsk disrupted the coordination of tests. Data no longer arrives. Music. Developers lose connection with the testing ground. Information about testing results has been interrupted. The schedule is broken. Documentation is captured by Russia. Technical characteristics are known to the enemy. Weaknesses of the system are revealed. Moscow can develop countermeasures, change tactics, adapt weaponry. The advantage of lasers is neutralized before mass application. The West will have to start from zero, create a new coordination system in another place with other methods. Perhaps revise the project itself, invest new billions, lose time, miss the moment, or close the project entirely. Admit failure, write off losses, look for other paths. The decision has not yet been made, but with every day, the probability of closure grows. Too many music resources are lost. The risks of continuation are too high. But this is only the tip of the iceberg. Pokrovsk music revealed the scale of NATO participation, showed the coordination system, proved the direct involvement of the West. But how many more secrets are hidden? How many projects remain secret? What other technologies are being tested in Ukraine? The documents hint at other developments. Mentions of classified programs, references to research centers, project codes without decryption. The full picture is not yet clear, but it is huge. Pokrovsk is just a fragment, one element of a big system. Russia continues to dig, study, reveal. Every new find, new questions. Answers come slowly, but the truth comes out. Gradually, inevitably, no matter how much the West denies. The find in Pokrovsk changes the understanding of the conflict. What seemed like a local war between Russia and Ukraine turns out to be a global confrontation. NATO is not just helping Kiev with weapons. The alliance is fighting directly against Russia. Before, they spoke about arms supplies, tanks, missiles, artillery. Western countries transfer equipment. The Ukrainian armed forces use it in battles. This is aid, indirect participation, not crossing the red line. Then they started talking about training. Western instructors train Ukrainian soldiers in Europe, on training grounds, teach tactics, work with equipment, pass on experience, also aid. Not direct intervention. But Pokrovsk shows something different. NATO officers on the territory of Ukraine in the conflict zone coordinate operations, choose targets, transfer data for strikes, manage intelligence, test new weapons. This is not aid, this is war. Intelligence via NATO satellites, targeting from Western analysts, coordination of strikes by alliance officers. The Ukrainian armed forces carry out commands, press the launch button, but they do not make the decision. Western military choose whom to kill, what to destroy, when to attack. In essence, a NATO war against Russia. Ukrainian soldiers are a tool, infantry, executors of someone else's will. The alliance fights with their hands, risks their lives, achieves its goals, officially remaining on the sidelines. Escalation is inevitable. Music. Every step from the West drags the next one along. First defensive weapons, then offensive, then long-range missiles, now laser systems. What is next? Laser weapons, a qualitative leap, changes the balance of forces in the air. Russian missiles lose effectiveness, drones are shot down, music, artillery is useless. Russia's advantage disappears. The war drags on, losses grow. If the project were realized fully, the course of the conflict would have changed. The Ukrainian armed forces would have received hundreds of laser installations, placed them along the front. Russian aviation would not have been able to work. Strikes on the rear would have ceased. The initiative would have passed to the enemy. NATO counted on this, invested billions, hurried with production, wanted to give Ukraine a decisive advantage, turn the tide, force Russia to retreat, music, or at least stop. But the capture of the base disrupted plans. The project is exposed, the technology compromised. The advantage is lost. The West will have to look for other paths. Time is missed. The moment is gone. The risk of further build-up remains. The West will not stop. Too much is invested, the stakes are too high. Defeat of Ukraine means defeat of NATO. Reputational, strategic, political, one cannot lose. That means they will look for new ways to help. Maybe other technologies, maybe more weapons, maybe direct intervention of the military. Escalation will continue, the conflict will deepen. The world will become more dangerous. Russia's position is understandable. The country is defending itself from a real threat. NATO is not an abstract enemy, somewhere far away. The alliance is here, on the border. It fights, kills Russian soldiers, destroys Russian facilities, tests weapons on Russian citizens. Moscow has the right to answer. Search for NATO bases in Ukraine, destroy them, seize documents, reveal the truth. Show the world who is actually fighting. Defense is legitimate, actions are justified. The search for other intelligence centers will continue. Pokrovsk is not the only base. There are others in Kharkiv, Dnipro, Odessa, Lviv. Each is a target for the Russian military. Each must be found, captured, or destroyed. Response measures are inevitable. Russia will not be silent. The West attacks. Moscow will answer. Maybe strikes on Western equipment on the territory of Ukraine. Maybe sanctions against countries whose officers coordinate operations. Maybe the release of new data, compromising Western politicians. The question of legitimacy stands acutely. Western music countries are participants in the conflict, direct ones. Their officers fight, their technologies kill, their satellites choose targets. That means they are a party to the war, not neutral observers, not peacekeepers. A warring party. International law is violated. Principles of non-intervention are trampled. The UN is silent. Western countries ignore norms, do what they want, justify it with any reasons. Russia is the aggressor, which means anything goes against it. Double standards in pure form. When Russia helps allies, it is intervention, aggression, violation of sovereignty. The West screams, imposes sanctions, accuses to the whole world. But when NATO creates bases in Ukraine, coordinates strikes, tests weapons, it is help, legal support, protection of democracy. Pokrovsk opened eyes to the scale of the deception. For 2 years, the West claimed that it is not fighting, only helping Ukraine defend itself, supplying weapons, training soldiers, but not participating in battles, not planning operations, not choosing targets. Lies from beginning to end. NATO officers coordinated strikes from the first days. Intelligence centers worked for months. Satellites transmitted data constantly. Western military managed the war. Ukrainians simply carried out orders. Puppets in the hands of the alliance. Now the evidence is in hand. Documents are captured. Names are known. Correspondence is revealed. It is useless to deny. The West got caught, lies to the world, deceives its own citizens, risks people's lives for the sake of geopolitical goals. What is next? The conflict moves to a new level. Russia knows about NATO bases, will look for them, destroy them, capture new evidence, reveal new secrets, compromise the West again and again. NATO will answer. Will strengthen aid to Ukraine, find new ways of coordination, create other intelligence centers, maybe introduce troops under another pretext, peacekeepers, observers, instructors. The names are not important. The essence is one: escalation. The world becomes more dangerous. Direct confrontation between Russia and NATO is a reality. For now, via Ukraine, but the line is blurring. The next step: a strike on a NATO base in Poland, interception of a Western reconnaissance plane, an attack on a convoy with weapons in Romania. Every step brings closer the big war. Nuclear weapons are on both sides. A mistake is fraught with catastrophe, but the parties continue. They increase tension, raise the stakes, hope that the enemy will retreat first. A dangerous game. History knows examples when such games ended in tragedies. Pokrovsk is a small city in the east of Ukraine, unknown music to anyone before the war, but it became a symbol of the West's lies, a symbol of NATO's real participation in the conflict, a symbol that the world is closer to a big war than it seems. Documents from the basement of a residential building revealed the truth, showed the scale of the deception, proved who is actually fighting. Now the question is, what will the world do with this information? Will it ignore it or finally open its eyes?